A few months ago, I made a video talking about some of the worst arcade games you could find in the wild, and since you guys love seeing some games being trashed, I decided to pick another 5 terrible games for your enjoyment. Hello and welcome, my friends, to The Flying Kick. I am Savino, and today, let's suffer together while we explore some of the worst games the arcades had to offer. Imagine getting hold of Combat Tribe's arcade board, a great game by the way, hack it and paint over the sprites just to make a boring fest of a game. That's exactly what Electronic Devices, an Italian company, did back in 1990. Mug Smashers may not be the most egregious game in this list, but believe me when I say this is probably one of the most unfair and annoying games I have had the displeasure of playing. The game starts well, with a story similar to Final Fight, but here this Kingpin wannabe, creatively called Mad Dog, kidnapped a policewoman called Sheila, who appears to be Alex Sisters, the ex-leader of the Angels gang. Alex is joined by Miles, his best friend, after both find out about the kidnapping in a questionable newspaper. Visually, the game is a mess. Aside from the awesome look Alex is sporting with his red leopard pants, tank top and white shades, the visuals here are pretty bland and inconsistent. The game is extremely flat and the artists couldn't decide if they wanted a black outline or not on their characters, so they went with both. They also got tired of shading the skin of some characters and made them as flat as possible to contrast with the highly shaded skin of the main character. The combat here is not that bad, you have a good amount of moves, from punches and kicks to some nice maneuvers that can be exploited to kill some bosses. Your character's hitbox are generous, the combat feel can even be called satisfying, although the controls could have been a bit more responsive. The biggest problem with this game is how unfair it is. Enemies will come from all corners of the screen and they move faster than your characters can deal with, so be ready to take many cheap shots. The AI here is pretty similar to Golden Axe, where enemies will always surround you no matter what. There is no waiting, they don't orbit your character when you are too busy, they simply rush towards your back and hit you as soon as they get in range. To make things worse, you don't have any iframes after being knocked down, so, as expected, you will be trapped by enemies constantly hitting you while you try, without success, to get up. They try to mitigate this with a small attack when you're getting up, but more often than not, it won't be enough to take you out of bad situations. But oh, there is more. After dying, your character won't be able to hit anyone until the blinking stops. So that little advantage you always have after losing a life here is put to waste. Sure, you could reposition yourself in the short amount of time you're invincible, but as I said, the enemies are quite fast and they will catch you no matter where you go. And let's not forget the bosses, which are the cheapest type of enemies you can find. They will interrupt your attacks all the time, jump across the screen to hit you, and some will attack you with constant projectiles. They were designed to take your money and they don't even hide. Yes, there are ways to exploit some of your attacks to infinite them, which makes things a bit easier, but even so, it will be a frustrating and boring experience. Talking about the bosses, the developers were super creative when naming them, with memorable names like Big Man, Hatman, Red Man, and of course, Handman. Honestly, this sounds more like a bunch of leftovers in Dr. Wile's lab than enemies from a beat'em up. The game has only 6 levels and it feels like an eternity because the levels are incredibly long, with the same enemies coming over and over again. As I said, this is not the worst game you could find, but coming after games like Final Fight and being no more than a hack of Combat Tribes, it should have been so much better. While Sangoku wasn't the first beat'em up from SNK, these honors belong to POW, it feels like it was, being the third beat'em up from that company and the first to be released for the much hyped Neo Geo. You wouldn't be wrong for expecting, well, Not this. To be fair, Sangoku has some positive points. The theme is unique, the characters' sprites are big and nicely detailed, and some of the enemies here are some of the best fuel you can find to light up some nightmares. The soundtrack is also pretty interesting, heavily influenced by traditional Japanese music, and despite not being the most fitting score for this genre, there are some very good tunes here. A bit weird, but good nonetheless. There are also some interesting mechanics here that allow you to collect new characters after releasing them from their spiritual prison. And with that, I'm out of positives to talk about. Despite boasting 55 megs, the largest beaten up to that date, Sengoku was extremely boring and mindless. Here you have your attack and your jump, and that's it. No specials, no running, no grab, just the most basic style of combat possible. And while this is not a problem, I mean, you can have good games with simple commands, that's not the case here. In Sangoku, all you have is your basic combo, and even so, you won't be using it too much. Most enemies here will die with one single hit, just like POW or Ikari Warriors, and the ones who need a couple more punches will be pushed away from you after each hit. This makes Sangoku an extremely frustrating game because most of your time with it will be going after your enemy after each hit or standing in one place waiting for them to come to you. It's a mindless button masher that will ask nothing from you. As I mentioned earlier, you can change to other characters after you find them in some levels, which is cool, but these characters add little to the game's variety. Here you can become a ninja, which is fast but weak, a samurai, which is low but strong, and a magical dog who cosplays as Sonic when jumping. While they have some unique and sometimes powerful attacks, you will only find them in specific moments and you have a timer to use them. If the timer runs out, the character will go away and you will have to find them again, which you probably won't. But as I said, this adds nothing to the game because most of your enemies will die with one hit or be pushed away from you. Another fun thing in this game is that some of the stronger enemies will not be pushed away from you so easily, so they are the ones that you could, in theory, finally use a full basic combo. But you are so naive in think the game will let you do that. In Sangoku, these enemies can easily interrupt your attacks and push you away from them, halting your combo midway. The bosses are another joke. You can kill most of them by locking them in a flying kick loop, or if you're playing with a friend, you both can simply spam your attacks until the boss dies, which is basically the best strategy in this game. The Neo Geo promised to bring the arcade experience to your home, and with Sangoku, they deliver it, bringing the worst of the coin muncher, button masher, boring fast part of the arcades directly to your living room. For only $900. If someone asks you about that awesome urban beat'em up from Sega, your answer, more likely than not, would be Streets of Rage. And chances are that this is the answer the person is looking for because I assure you, nobody in their right mind would consider DD Crew to be awesome. Released by Sega in June 1991, DD Crew is nothing short of impressive. Yeah, I know it contradicts my last statement, but bear with me here. It was the first urban themed beaten up from Sega, and it offered one of the most impressive graphics at the time, featuring realistic characters and some impressive animations. Actually, the animations in this game are impressive even for today. DD Crew also has a great OST with some influences from hip-hop that are a blast to listen to. The title theme alone is worth a listen.
Shut up already. Damn. Shut up already. Everybody
And of course, there are the backgrounds, which are not only diverse and filled with details, but the game also features some amazing set pieces that are pretty cool to look at. I mean, this scene on the Ferris wheel or this one on the cable car is pretty awesome. But yeah, here is where everything goes downhill. Despite the excellent presentation, DD Crew is an incredibly boring game to play. The first problem here is your basic combo. Your attacks, no matter which one of the 4 playable characters you pick, have no range whatsoever. Take a look at this. You basically have to kiss your enemy if you want to hit them. But that's not the biggest problem here. Oh no, the biggest offender here is the complete lack of crowd control. Your basic attack or your flying kick can only hit one enemy at a time. In other words, when you align your enemies and start to attack them, only the one closest to you will be hit. The others will be free to hit you as much as they want. I'm not sure what was happening at Sega headquarters at the time, but I'm sure drugs were involved because this makes no sense. But that's not the worst. You also lack any special move. No specials, no desperation, nothing. And coming from the company that invented the special attack with Golden Axe makes everything even more baffling. The lack of enemy variety here also doesn't help. You will fight against the same 4 enemies throughout all 7 levels of the game. You have this dude with the knives, this fat dude, this guy wearing a kimono, and finally the soldier who, despite carrying a weapon, will never shoot you. This game is so broken that the only way to get somewhere here is to go to a corner and spam your flying kick or using your running attack. But be careful while using this running attack, because if the enemy is not far enough from you, you will get hit too. Thankfully, this game is completely devoid of an AI, so most of the times your enemies will line up for you while you jump and flying kick their faces. DD Crew was never released to anything. The game never achieved the success Sega was hoping for, and they invested a good money in this one, releasing 3 different arcade models for 2, 3, and 4 players. Unfortunately, as we will see ahead, Sega didn't learn its lesson after this one. Released in September 1991, a few months after DD Crew, Spiderman the video game is another impressive looking game from the House of Sonic, featuring our favorite spider hero and also Hawkeye, Namor, and Black Cat. Spider-Man is a comic book playing before your eyes, with big and colorful sprites, nicely done backgrounds, and excellent cutscenes. This was one game that would certainly grab the attention of any kid wandering around an arcade in the 90s. I mean, the cabinet alone was enough to draw your attention. Spider-Man had everything to be a great game, from the Konami-like graphics to the perfect IP, but unfortunately, this is not the case. The first thing that we will notice here is that Spidey and his friends are either poisoned by something or suffering from some kind of terminal illness. Probably both, because as you can see, just standing by and looking at the scenery will kill you. For some reason, and this reason is called money, someone at Sega decided that it was a great idea to make your health a countdown. So you will be fighting not only your enemies, but time itself. Yes, timers are a common thing in beat'em ups, but they were there to force you to move on and not to make you weaker by each second. Here, even when you are winning, the game is punishing you. But that's not the only problem. It would be possible to manage this countdown if your characters moved with a decent speed or were strong enough to quickly kill the enemies and move on, but here everything is slow as heck. And this is expected. I mean, look at this posture. Is he okay? Aside from the game punishing you and the excessive slowness everyone moves in the game, the combat here is also pretty lame. Attacking your enemies feels stiff, the controls don't feel responsive enough, and your enemies are way too fast for you to do anything against most of them. I mean, you can try to spam some of your aerial attacks like in DD Crew, because other than that, you will be swarmed by enemies left and right, especially when fighting the bosses. From time to time, the camera will zoom out and you will play a platforming section that feels like a poor man's Strider. It's not really a bad mode, but it will appear every other level, and after a couple of plays, you will get more bored than thrilled by it. In my opinion, the biggest problem with this game is how the heroes are underutilized. Instead of each one of them using some unique powers and moves, Sega decided to make them just clones of each other, instead of going through a more interesting route like Konami would do with the X-Men 1 year later. I don't know what the arcade department of Sega was doing back then, because they were killing on the Mega Drive at this time with games like Golden Axe 2 and obviously Streets of Rage. But whatever it was, as we will see next, it didn't improve with time. Enters Arabian Fight, the first beaten up made on the Sega System 32, showing all the power of sprite scaling as never before. Seriously, this game looks amazing. From the already mentioned sprite scaling to the awesome parallax scrolling, which is incredibly well made. Even for today's standards, the parallax effect here looks amazing. And there are still enemies entering the screen from the first plane whom you can obviously throw back after grabbing them in some spectacular fashion, making Turtles in Time look a bit timid even. And like Turtles in Time, you have 4 unique characters to pick, and it can be played by 4 people at the same time. Also in the game's favor, it has a unique theme, which hasn't been explored much aside from this game and Arabian Magic, which is a way better game than this one. Arabian Fight also uses a magic system pretty similar to Golden Axe, where you collect magic lamps, and the more you have, the more powerful your attack is. And again, here is where any compliment to this game ends. Look, I'm not picking on Sega, but they had a streak of bad games that was pretty impressive. So, as expected after the last 2 games, Arabian Fight gameplay is awful. Forget about not being able to hit multiple enemies at once. Here, you won't be able to hit anyone. The combat is pretty simple. You have your attack, jump, and special if you press both buttons at the same time, but good luck trying to do anything in this game. The simple use of your magic is based on luck, since you need to press both buttons with a surgical precision, otherwise you look like an idiot jumping and kicking in the air while desperately trying to use your magic. And it's not only your special attack that is flawed, oh no, everything here is. Trying to hit your enemies is almost impossible, since the hurt box is so absurdly wonky that more often than not, you will helplessly flail your arms until the game decides to process the hit. And the choppy animation doesn't help either. Despite it have some awesome special effects, it seems there was no available memory to properly animate the characters, because everything here looks pretty bad. Another thing that will frustrate you a lot in this game is that the camera doesn't follow the player. While in normal games the camera will lock on the player and follow their movement, here the camera will center on whoever it wants, leaving you outside the screen a lot of times. And of course, enemies can hit you while you're outside your view. The game is not that big with only 7 levels, but it's so frustrating and unfair that the 50 minutes that you take to beat this game will feel like 50 days. Oh, and there are the screams. Your character will shout with almost every move, so be ready to hear during all the time you play the game. I would say I was surprised to see such a bad game coming from Sega, but after playing Diddy Crew and Spiderman, I can't say I am. While there are some good ideas here and some pretty nice set pieces, the game fails in everything that makes a beaten up fun. It looks amazing, but it plays like crap, and luckily it was never ported to anything at the time, because no one deserved to spend 50 or 60 bucks in this thing. Fortunately, Sega would redeem itself a few months later, and in great style I must add, with Revenge of Death Adder, but up to this point, Sega really messed up with these games. And that's it for the video, folks. I hope you guys have again enjoyed me suffered playing these great games for your enjoyment. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel before you go watch something else. You can now also help the channel by buying beaten ups on the affiliated link below. Take a look. I will be back pretty soon with another video for you guys, but in the meantime, I hope you all have an awesome week, and remember, keep beaten up.